News. New York City.
The FAQ NYC podcast getting more and more interesting by the minute.
FAQ.
It's FAQ NYC, the New Yorkers podcast from the newsroom by and for New Yorkers, the city. I'm Professor Christina Greer here with Katie Honan. Harry Siegel is off today. Let's jump right in with just some of the news from another jam-packed week in New York City.
Thank you, Chrissy. Okay, here's the news of the week. Mayor Eric Adams has limited the time single adult asylum seekers can stay at the city shelters, giving 60-day notice to anyone who has stayed for longer than 60 days in the city's care. Mayor Adams told reporters last week, quote, "We have no more room in the city and we need help," end quote, as he continued to ask for more money and resources from the federal and state government. New York City shelters currently house an all-time high of more than 105,000 people, including more than 54,000 migrants. To meet the demand, the city has opened nearly 200 facilities to shelter asylum seekers, and this is since last spring. They've repurposed church basements, gyms, and warehouses, and opened 13 large-scale HERCs. Speaking of HERCs, on Monday, the city's public hospital system, which operates those shelters, put out a request for proposals for private vendors to take over the day-to-day management of these shelters. This is per my colleague Gwen Hogan's reporting. Whoever is selected will have to, quote, "be able to provide full-scale project management support," end quote, as the city continues to struggle with housing and taking care of so many asylum seekers. A special election will be held September 27th to replace Assemblymember Daniel Rosenthal, who represented Kew Gardens Hills and College Point and Electchester and other neighborhoods in Queens since 2017. He stepped down to take a job with UJA, Federation of New York. The Wall Street Journal reported this week that Lyft is looking to sell off its 68,000 scooters and bikes. This is as Curbed reported on why those speedy e-bikes so often do not work. Reporter John Sirico found that City Bike didn't anticipate as much demand for its newest e-bike fleet, the light gray speedy bikes, which means they'll likely last 2 years instead of a predicted 5. So ride them while you can if you can find one that works. And finally, Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez joined the picket line with striking SAG actors on Monday, asking how many private jets does David Zaslav need, and telling reporter Jeff Coltin that she did see Barbie this weekend in Astoria because it's a union production.
Oh, interesting. That brings us to our guest today, Jeff Coltin, born and raised in Phoenix before moving to New York City to attend the prestigious Fordham University. Go Rams. He worked at New York One. Go Rams. He worked at New York One and then joined City and State, where he was for 8 years, where he covered New York City and sometimes some state politics. Last week, he joined Politico as part of their new Playbook team alongside Nick Reisman and Emily No, both friends of the pod. Jeff is a friend of FAQ NYC. He's joining us today for the first time. Jeff, thank you so much for coming on.
And thank you for having me. Yes, we are very excited to revamp Playbook, but I do just have to throw in, I came on FAQ back in the 2021 mayor's race. We talked about some excitement.
I'm sorry.
I was like, yeah, I'm reading the script. Listen, everybody knows I'm Ron Burgundy. You put a script in front of me, I'll read it. But I was like, I've talked to Jeff on this pod before,
I should have checked,
but I'm just going to read it. That's okay. You know what, Katie? It's like, basically, this podcast is BK and AK. It's either before Katie or after Katie. So Jeff was on BK, and it doesn't count because it was before Katie Honan. So that was just a whole different era, Katie. Don't worry about it.
He's a different man now. He's got a new job. That was the old Jeff.
Listen,
exactly.
I'm fascinated by the shuffling of the deck that is New York City political reporters. I mean, it's so many fascinating people going different places. We've got, I don't know what's going on at New York One. Okay, that's a different podcast. But it seems like there's mass exodus there. We've got Politico building the squad. You know, you've got Juan Manuel Benitez going to Columbia Journalism School, where it looks like Jelani Cobb is just like building up a super team over there. I know we support the Newmark School on this podcast, Katie Honan. I get it.
I don't speak of Columbia.
That's right.
Who?
But I did go to Columbia, but that's okay. So we've got love for everybody, but I'm so excited for this new venture for you and Emily and Nick. So tell us a little bit more about how that came to be and what you're most excited about working on once you get over to Politico.
Yeah, so it was funny. I mean, at least for me, we were all recruited separately. I only found out late that Emily and Nick would also be joining Politico at the same time. And I was extremely excited. I mean, I yelped on the phone when they told me. Because I mean,
do you want to give us
Emily,
a sample of that yelp or no?
It was like, woo! Like, yeah. I mean, yeah, Emily. No, I've known personally. I see her at work events, at press conferences and such all the time. And we're members of the Inner Circle together. We sing and dance on stage once a year. So big fan of Emily and most of all her reporting. I mean, just, really solid, really knows elections. And then Nick Reisman, because he's based in Albany, I barely personally know him. I think we've met once or twice. But I mean, his reporting, I mean, if you want to know what's going on in Albany, you've got to read the State of Politics blog. You got to follow his Twitter. You got to watch his videos. So just like, I mean, it's, I guess I can't call it a dream team because I'm on it, but like, wow, I'm really excited to work with those two. Some have called it on Twitter a murderer's row. I believe that's a baseball term, not about homicide, but we'll see. We'll see.
Well, isn't a bunch of crows are called a murder?
A murder of crows. Oh, yeah. A gaggle of geese. Yeah. The gaggle of geese.
You're the gaggle of geese. Well, I love it because I'm thinking like if you guys are, I know Emily's from Chicago, so if you guys were like the 90s Bulls, it's like Jordan, Pippen, and Rodman. I'm curious as to like who's the Rodman.
The 90s Bulls defeated my Phoenix Suns in 1993.
With Jeff's style and clothing, I think he's the Dennis Rodman of this.
He's the Dennis Rodman of the crew.
Sometimes Jeff will whip out like a real like funky outfit.
Well, I'll be happy to be Dennis Rodman. I think he dated Madonna, right? Yeah.
Oh yeah. Well, it's early. I haven't had my coffee. I was about to say all types of wild stuff. So, before we get into sort of some of the things that are going on this week, I just wanted to ask, you were at City and State for almost a full decade. Give us a little bit of your perspective on the difference between covering the de Blasio administration and covering now the Adams administration. You have basically a year and a half of an Adams administration. Are there some marked differences between the two? And if so, what are they? Because Katie and I we have our thoughts on.
We've talked about this enough. Yeah, we'll get a fresh voice.
Yeah. Gosh, because the New York City press corps is such a ecosystem, I feel like we all kind of influence each other when we have these discussions because, it's not everybody is at every press conference. I mean, we kind of work together. We all try and get to the truth, hold the mayor accountable. And we're both competitors and cooperators, I think. And that's what I really like about being a New York City reporter. So the Adams administration, I mean, it's just different. It's a little more like a lot of people joined the de Blasio administration, I think, because they had these like high-minded progressive ideals. I think it was very Kennedy 1960, not to say de Blasio was any Kennedy, but inspired people to join city service like that. And with Eric Adams, it just feels like it's maybe less focused on the like high-minded ideals and a little more about like we're going to get stuff done. And of course that's their branding, but I think he's brought a different type of person to City Hall for sure, his appointees. And then
what does that mean?
What does that mean? What it means is, I guess what I'm saying is what I'm thinking of is like a lot of his friends, a lot of his family members as well are being brought in. And then we're seeing a lot of turnover as well. We're seeing already a number of high profile people have left City Hall. I think notably more than from de Blasio's administration, which absolutely saw lots of people leave eventually. That's city politics, but more people have left early with the Adams administration. And I mean, I'm just barely scratching the surface of it. There's many differences.
Yeah, but I had a quick question for you, Jeff, because Katie and I talked about this extensively, and Harry as well on the pod. I thought that Commissioner Sewell leaving, albeit it's a big deal, she's a police commissioner, it's New York City, largest paramilitary organization, separate from the U.S. Army. We get it. But I didn't see it as such a huge shakeup just because he now has the person he really wants in there from day one, and is one of his homies, and the whole vibe. I mean, even just the physical stature of the two of them together, Commissioner Caban and Mayor Adams, and I always struggle with, I feel like sometimes the mayor thinks is a police officer first and a mayor second. So having Commissioner Sewell leave, even though it seems by all accounts she was respected by the rank and file, I don't really know how the brass felt about her, but she was making progress, but clearly was like, this isn't a ship that I can fully steer El Solo. It looks like the mayor is always going to be a shadow. I didn't see it as a huge deal that she was leaving because I never saw the fit to be a really good fit from day one. You're coming from Long Island. So my tone on Long Island, it was
She's from Queens. She's from Queens.
She's from Queens, but she was, in leadership in Long Island. Oh. I was just correcting my tone because sometimes I get real like Long Island. So I was self-correcting. I'm working on things in 2023. So is it a huge deal? I mean, I tend to not think it was. Others obviously disagree. Where do you fall on that spectrum?
Yeah, I think policy-wise, I don't think it's a huge deal. I mean, the impression I got is that, nothing huge is going to change in the NYPD because I think that Eric Adams and Deputy Mayor Phil Banks are still going to be exerting a lot of, if not more, influence over the police department than they were before. But politics-wise, I think it was notable just because, that the first female police commissioner, one who was, as far as I could tell, pretty widely respected in the department, felt pushed out. And so I think it was really notable in that way that it showed, it seemed to me like some weakness in the mayor's leadership to lose a police commissioner after only 18 months or so. But right, policy-wise, I don't think this is going to shake up the city, or I don't even know if we're going to be able to, even feel the difference on the ground, really.
I had said I think it was, of all the people who left, and we're in our little bubble, so it's like, oh my God, Max Young is leaving, and no shade to Max, but the regular person doesn't know who that is, right? Like Frank Carone, oh my God, Frank Carone's leaving, oh my, like no one knows who he is, but the police commissioner, who by all accounts was incredibly well respected, a historic position. I will say last week I went to the Ascension, the announcement of Commissioner Caban. He, everyone was very gracious towards Commissioner Sewell. I know my colleague Yoav Gonen had reported some of the scenarios in which he that the mayor had kind of intervened in the Jeffrey Madry stuff. But, I think all things in due time will reveal themselves. And I don't know, I'm still hoping for a Sewell memoir or something. But I know also she apparently, doesn't like, the New York Times had reported, she just wasn't used to sort of this notoriety. Even if you're a top cop in Nassau County, it's not as big as New York City, and you don't have the same level of, you're not on TV every single day. Long Island cops are on TV now because of Gilgo, but other than that, like Nassau and Suffolk police officers don't really get that much attention. But Jeff, if I could just, I am always curious, just like your origin story briefly, you come to New York City. I guess what drew you to New York City, and was a sort of always an interest of yours to get into politics? And how did you find your way, I guess, focusing on New York City politics? I know some people think like, I want to go to DC and cover the president or something, which actually seems really boring to me. But where your thoughts were, did you always want to come to New York City, and how that all shook out?
Yeah, I'll give the short version. I went to a Jesuit high school, the Catholic subset in Phoenix, Arizona. And so
that's why Jesuit high schools exist, to filter people to Jesuit colleges.
Exactly.
Well, first, hopefully the seminary, and then when that doesn't work out, then come on to college.
Exactly. Look, like all Catholic boys, I think when I was around like 12, I was like, maybe I could be a priest. And then I decided pretty quickly against it. But, carried on in the Jesuit education and wanted to look at a Jesuit college. Fordham was on that list. Beautiful Fordham University, the Rose Hill campus in the Bronx. Shout out also to the Lincoln Center campus in Manhattan.
That's right.
I visited New York City for the very first time when I was 17. I was a senior in high school, considering, where to attend. And I'm 17 years old. I go into a full-on bar, and then Piano Man comes on, and all these drunk college students are singing out loud Piano Man, and I'm like, this is the greatest city in the world. This is incredible. Oh my goodness. And boom, next thing you know, I end up in New York. And I wasn't like a student journalist in high school or anything, but I learned about WFUV, the radio station on Fordham's campus. And I'm like, this sounds cool to get involved with. So I walk in, I get involved, and that just brought me in to the world of New York City journalism, and pretty quickly after that, politics. WFUV, by the way, it's an incredible music station, 90.7 FM. But then they also have this great student journalism program that really trains a lot of great journalists who are almost all undergraduates at Fordham, and brings them into either the public radio world or just the journalism world in general. So that's my origin story, and came into New York and City Hall through that.
Shout out to Kiln Gale, the Irish music on Sundays for FUV.
Absolutely. All the tin whistles and all that.
I think that may have been my very first on-air radio experience was with WFUV. And I did that quite a bit before I started, chatting with WNYC. But I've got friends in Massachusetts who get WFUV on the weekends just because they love all the different music programming. It's really amazing.
Yeah, the music is great. So I know you've been at City and State, and you've really I don't want to sound like a corny person, but watching your growth through City and State, to this, your own ascension to Politico. Do you remember the first sort of big story you had at City and State, and how you came about it? And I will say, sitting in the press room with Jeff, he's always working the phone like a telethon. He's always on the phone, people calling him, people coming in. So it is great to watch you that. But I don't know if you remember your kind of first big story.
Definitely. My first cover story with City and State as a magazine was one about closing Rikers. This was, I want to say, mid 2016. So it was when the Close Rikers movement was really picking up, at least in its most recent iteration. And I was just fascinated by it. And I was starting from very limited knowledge. I was a very new reporter on the beat. And I think that was just a really helpful story to get to understand a whole lot of things about how New York City government and the criminal justice system work. And, the story was, you can't remember the headline or anything, but it was basically about wow, Rikers is a hellhole. Is it time to close Rikers? And talking to a bunch of folks. And, oh my gosh, I mean, just the news in the past couple days now, there's been more deaths. And then my old colleagues at City and State just reported that the Department of Correction has publicly reported 68 deaths in the past 9 years. But actually, there's evidence that there's been 120 deaths under Department of Correction care. And, there's a variety of reasons why some of those weren't reported, but some of them just seem to have been effectively hidden. It's like, why wasn't this made clear? So, Rikers is a whole can of worms, and it's just an absolute travesty in many ways. And that was my first story. And it's one that's been continually relevant through my entire time being a reporter, obviously.
What should we be looking for? I mean, I know you can't predict the news, but as you move to Politico and you and Nick and Emily, get your sea legs, what do you think the next 18 months will look like in the city?
I'm
Nostradamus.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I mean, look, I really like elections. So of course, I'm looking ahead to the 2025 mayoral election, where Eric Adams is going to try and get reelected. I feel like conversation about that has really picked up in the past month or so. A lot of people have started gossiping about that. There were a couple of articles written. So, definitely interested. Like everybody else, I think that Eric Adams is heavily favored at this point to be reelected. But I also think that, 18 months or let me think. I guess it's 2 years now before the Democratic primary, effectively. Boy, a lot could change. So, I'm not going to give him the 99% chance of reelection because other things could change. And I mean, there's just so much else. I mean, New York City is incredibly dynamic. I mean, 1 year ago, I think it was about this time in July, we kind of had the first press conference from Eric Adams saying, boy, there's a lot of asylum-seeking migrants coming into New York City. We're kind of struggling to keep up here. And now that has been one of the major stories in New York City politics for the past year. And a year and a week ago, I hadn't even heard of it. This was just coming. This was a new policy issue, new political issue that was coming to head. So, right, you can't predict. But of course, I mean, I think the reelection is going to be a big thing. I'm curious to see also if the city council starts to, flex its muscles, maybe be a little more interesting. I think they've had a very slow start, but partly because they've had so many new members. But now everyone is kind of going to be going into their second term. We've seen some battles with Eric Adams as the city council acting as kind of a more progressive counterweight. But there's it depends on the issue. But definitely going to be paying attention to the city council. I think it's going to become a more interesting legislative body in the next year or two.
And just point of clarification, city council members do have to run again in 2025. Am I correct?
Yes.
So even though they ran in 2021, they ran in 2023, and they will also run in 2025.
Nonstop elections that 1% of eligible voters can vote in.
Right. It's just such a colossal waste of money.
Jeff, I wanted to ask, and I do want to get back to, what do they say, put a pin in it on the city council, but, looking ahead to 2025.
Okay, I'm sorry, Hilaria Baldwin. What did they say?
Hilaria.
Hilaria. Do they say, what did they say? They put a pin in it? Okay. Thank you, Katie. Yes. Get out of here.
I think I heard someone say that once and I was like, wow, that makes me want to die. I'll repeat it on the podcast.
Right. The new thing is you just say, I don't know how to say this in English. So then everyone thinks you're like worldly and bilingual.
Yeah, I'm not.
I think of the bugs at the Museum of Natural History where they have them kind of splayed out in display cases and they're pinned to the wall.
That's what you think.
They put a pin. I'm picturing being pinned to the wall,
oh my,
like a little bug.
This podcast took a turn.
The city council members is pinned. But when it comes to 2025, as we stand this moment at this moment in time, it just does. I can't picture someone who could challenge Eric Adams and really defeat him with the money the mayor has and all that. Mm-hmm. And I know there are no real moral victories if you lose in politics, but do you think someone could make a run of it in 2025 to sort of then set the tone for 2029? Or I don't know what the sort of strategy is for that. And, if it's sort of like, I'm going to run to the way, way far left to at least maybe push. Because I do think if Mayor Adams sees some momentum behind a really far left challenger, who knows which way he might maybe move things. So I don't know your take on that. And even if you want to name some names, if we've all hear people, but I don't know who you think might be, or even maybe a way more conservative Democrat. And of course, a Republican, with some people with the way looking at the way some districts shaped up for the council races and could be for November, things do turning red a little bit.
Sure. Look, Curtis Sliwa, I think overperformed in 2021. I don't think at this point a Republican, I don't think at this point a current Republican has a shot at winning in 2025. Eric Adams, of course, former Republican, and look, a lot of Republicans really like the guy. They think he's kind of the best they could actually get as a Democrat. Mm-hmm. So interesting to see with that. I think there's definitely going to be a progressive challenger to the mayor. He himself has been like, there's a coordinated effort to take me down. And people joke about it because the way he talks about it, but like, it's entirely true. I mean, there absolutely is. There is there are a lot of progressives and they're all texting each other and talking about, okay, how do we take Eric Adams down? How do we get a more progressive mayor instead? So he's not the conspiracy theorist there. It's happening. And I think that depending on, if it's status quo, if Eric Adams stays at this level of relative popularity and, no surprise massive scandals or whatever, then I think the chances of a progressive beating him in 2025 are low. And I think that there will be a push more to just get out there, just push him to the left. You'll probably lose, but then, hey, maybe if you do a great job as a candidate, then we will all support you in 2029 when it's an open seat again. And I mean, that could be, there's a lot of progressive politicians in the city, and there's a lot of them who are ambitious. And I think a lot of them are considering that. They're like, okay, yeah, maybe I'll lose in 2025, but you could become the hero. You could become the progressive standard bearer and a big name. And I think there's going to be some temptation for that.
But Jeff, that's my question, because there are a lot of progressives and there's a lot of temptation. Will the progressives be able to organize themselves? Because it's still ranked choice voting. So are you going to have 3 and 4 progressives all running, and then they essentially cancel themselves out yet again? And do you think Eric Adams is sort of banking on that? Because again, a lot can happen between 2025 and 2029. I mean, I think Christine Quinn thought, after Bloomberg's third term, she was the heir apparent, and the winds of the city had turned actively against her for a host of reasons. But, there was that setup where she's like, oh, well, if you sort of help out the mayor in this end, and then, you'll sort of be rewarded on the back end. So that's not even guaranteed. Do you think that the left can get themselves together and actually put up one person that actually has a chance to defeat the mayor?
Yeah. So for 2025, I think that is likely. I think there will be a lot of coalescing around one progressive standard bearer, just because that is like the main conversation people are having. I mean, every progressive that I talk to, anybody who doesn't like Eric Adams and is in some sort of organizational progressive job, they're like, we need to coordinate. We need to coordinate. Everybody is like shook thinking back to 2021, where the progressive movement was split between Stringer and Morales and Wiley, and then Stringer went down, and then Morales went down, and then everybody ran to Wiley. But the thought was, it was like too little, too late. Mm-hmm. And I think that is very much on the top of people's minds. So for 2025, I think that the progressive movement will coalesce behind one candidate. I mean, look, there might also be a Paperboy Prince that runs in there, somebody that gains like a few percentage points. But I think the main one, 2029. When it's an open seat again, all bets are off. I mean, I'm sure it's going to be just like 2021 again. We're going to have, 15 candidates on the ballot or something, and 40 candidates that try to make the ballot. Mm-hmm. But I think that progressive really, everyone's talking about, hey, we've got to learn our lesson.
What I feel and think, which are sometimes the same, is that there are a lot of people who, on the left, who dislike the mayor. And they're so blinded by their disdain for the mayor, they're not paying attention to some of the things that the mayor is actually doing, good and bad. So, and this is a subtext for all the people who like to email Harry to say that I'm too kind to the mayor. That's what this is where this statement's coming from. So this mayor is really good at politics. And I think that he is sprinkling enough policy around the city for different groups. White ethnics, Black ethnics, rich folks, not bothering them, not making them integrate their schools. Like, there are a lot of things that he's doing that are either keeping people silent or keeping people supportive. So I think that there's some progressives that just really dislike him. Maybe it's the corruption. Maybe it's Phil Banks. Maybe it's the dragging your feet on universal pre-K. Maybe it's the fact that Rikers isn't yet solved, that no one seems to be able to solve it. The list goes on as to why they might dislike him. But it seems as though they have a tunnel vision of like this disdain, which also sometimes I think this is where a racial component comes in, where they're like, oh, he's not smart. That's a mistake. Because the man is smart and he may be smarter than them. And they're going to look up and see how someone goes from being a beat cop to the mayor and realize he's actually very smart. So how does the left kind of change that calcified perception of this unsmart, corrupt, non-working mayor, where I'm like, you're 1 out of 3. Like, he may have some corruption and corrupt people. But as Harry and Katie and I have talked about, it's like, well, what's the level of corruption that people really care about?
Mm.
You know, like most voters don't really care if you have, you know, a Phil Banks in your circle. De Blasio had lots of corrupt people in his circle. So it's like, it's a level of corruption we're just kind of accustomed to. It's American way. So the man knows the city very well. So if the left is supposed to organize and get a candidate that can actually take down Eric Adams, how would they strategize to do that? Because policy-wise, it seems like he's sprinkling enough to different groups to kind of placate them and essentially make
scaffolding. I mean, that's the one that comes to mind immediately. He just made this announcement about cleaning up the scaffolds. I mean, if he can make a notable difference on city streets, taking down the sidewalk sheds in front of buildings, I mean, that's going to win him votes. That will.
These are the issues that when people win candidates votes that I think a lot of folks who pay attention to politics, but they aren't politicians, don't understand.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, look, closing Rikers. I mean, boy, that's a much more difficult, not that taking down scaffold will be too easy, but, that's a more complicated policy question. Whereas like, yeah, you can just focus on quote unquote, getting stuff done, getting rid of sidewalk sheds, sweeping the homeless folks off the street and, making them go somewhere else. Boy, that's going to it's going to win the mayor a lot of votes. So your point is, I have heard you say this many times on FAQ, and I think it is a very important one to make because too many people are quick to just write off the mayor as like, I don't know, was he just like lucky that he became mayor? Like, I mean, hey, of course there's a little bit of luck, but
De Blasio's lucky. De Blasio's the luckiest man I've ever encountered. You don't become a black man beat cop and the second mayor of the largest city in the United States. It's just, it doesn't happen in this country. Like, it just doesn't happen that way. Like, it's not luck. So, I mean, yes, Scott Stringer imploding, Maya imploding. Like, there's not Maya, Diane Morales, like having Catherine Garcia and Maya. Like, yes, that's a little bit of
Scott
luck
Stringer too.
And
I think Scott Stringer's story took a lot of wind out of the there was
absolutely so like
a lot of
that
implosion.
I would put in a luck category, but how Eric Adams ascends from being a beat cop to a politician to a pretty savvy one at that is something that, because he isn't your Corey, Hakeem, Fenty, Obama, Dinkins, lawyer, sort of speaks a certain way, the word articulate drives me insane. But, he's not your traditional Black politician that a lot of white progressives are accustomed to. And so there's this knee-jerk reaction of just saying, like, he's just not smart and we can discount him. I'm like, that is a grave mistake. Like, I can't tell people enough. I'm like, stop doing that. You're going to look up and this is how you lose. Consistently. And I think, Eric Adams winning and a lot of the power structure in New York, not knowing Eric Adams and not knowing anyone who knows Eric Adams is still very unsettling for a lot of people.
Yeah. No, I'll say I think there's very much that idea out there among some folks, that the mayor is, lazy or not smart. The progressive movement, the more organized groups like the People's Plan and the Working Families Party and the DSA, they're trying to be more disciplined in the message with stuff like Eric Adams raised my rent. Maybe you've seen those those T-shirts out there, which I think is very much a winning message. Even if you can't directly connect the mayor, it's a little more indirect about raising rent. But like, wow, I mean, whatever. That is a winning message saying that Eric Adams is making the city more expensive. So if the progressive movement can stick to that kind of message discipline and actually coordinate better, then I think that's a better path to a potential victory of taking him down. But again, he is still very much the leader in the clubhouse and the favorite going into 2025. At this point. But, also it's not all about the election. The progressive movement and is also trying to get policy wins. And sometimes the way to do that is by, weakening the mayor or making the city council, reminding them they have a little bit of power and there's steps along the way. And I think that, as somebody who covers elections, I can often be too focused on 2025 and not thinking about the other goals along the way of, certain legislation or the Rent Guidelines Board or, things years off that I haven't even thought of. Nobody's even thinking of, but somebody is laying the groundwork for, like Eric Adams laying the groundwork for becoming mayor 32 years ago, and it actually happening.
Well, God did tell him to run, so
there you go.
You got to start with that.
Jeff, you created a perfect transition. If you could visualize yourself being unpinned at the Natural History Museum to talk about the city council. I know. I mean, if you think about this time last year, the city council was in the middle of, oh, wait, that budget we passed, it cut a lot of money from the DOE's budget. Oh, shit. Did you know? I didn't know. But now you're looking at the council where they have a victory on the veto override. They're starting to get a little fiery. That thing where they edited what the mayor was saying. They got some Photoshop skills. That was pretty good. So if you want to talk about how the council could continue with this, and especially maybe even becoming a little bit of a further thorn in the mayor's side, maybe he'll start picking off even more individual council members to do impressions of at press conferences. I mean, he's done Lincoln Wrestler to add to his Brad Lander repertoire, but do you just talk a little bit about the council's role and what we could maybe see? I know they're kind of taking it easy this summer or whatever. No, they have it stated on August 3rd. So, but yeah.
Yeah, well, yeah, they only legally have to hold one meeting in July and August, so they're taking it slow. But yeah, it's been an interesting time. I think that Adrienne Adams has built up a good amount of respect and appreciation among the council members. Even the Republican caucus, actually, which is just so interesting. The way that the Republicans in the city council are generally much more integrated into things than the minority in the assembly or in the state senate or Congress or whatever. It's a much more, generally speaking, a more cohesive body. And yeah, I think they're all, they all appreciate the speaker, and I think she's going to be, 99% chance reelected fine as speaker next year and get another 2-year term to continue this. And yeah, I think there was some question at the beginning. I mean, her politics with Eric Adams' politics seemed to be pretty darn aligned. And of course, their personal stories of both being named Adams, both growing up in Queens and both going to Big Side High School at the same time. Crazy. One would think that they could end up, really seeing eye to eye and working together. But no, well, first of all, there is some, personal differences, but more than that, it's just the nature of the mayor and the city council. I mean, those jobs are meant to be, or at least always have been, butting up against each other. And they have different goals and different purposes. And one of them runs a sprawling government and one of them runs 51 members. And so, yeah, they really have been, battling on issues like street homelessness and on issues like housing vouchers. And there's probably 10 other things that have happened recently that I'm not even thinking of. And I think there's going to be another 24 things happening before the end of the year, differences between the mayor and the speaker's office. So yeah, it was a very slow start for the city council. Nobody denies that. I mean, it seems like they haven't passed any, marquee bills until recently, but now I think it's going to be an interesting time, and both for the personal storylines between Adams, and then also for the real policy to see if the city council can effectively push the mayor on certain things.
I'd like your take, with the city FEPS voucher, bills passing, mayor vetoing, veto override. It was weird because it was it passed with a veto-proof majority. There was some speculation that he's going to start picking off members. I tried to do some, but it didn't seem to be happening. So I guess my question for you is, why do you think, what was the political calculation behind the mayor? Why do I think veto is tripping me up. Why the mayor vetoed it if he knew they were going to override it. And I know it's not over yet. They could still do legal challenges. I'll leave that to smarter legal brains, but I want to get your take on why you think he did that.
Yeah, of course, I'm curious to see how far he takes this lawsuit and whether it actually is able to stop the bill. But I think I get the politics of what he's trying to do. I mean, if he and his administration really think that this isn't going to go well and this is going to cost them too much money, or there simply won't be enough affordable housing to put people into, which of course is a problem, then he's just right now really, putting a flag in and saying, I don't agree with this. And the way things are, he doesn't run the government on his own. There's a city council. His government might have to implement this new voucher system, this expanded city FEPS vouchers. But he is, very firmly saying, I disagree with this. The cost of all of this is complicated. We've seen relatively different estimates. Nobody questions that the initial upfront cost is going to be very expensive, but the difference in opinion is whether that will be offset by all the good benefits of getting more people into stable housing. And simply put, the mayor doesn't think it's going to be offset. So interesting politics here. This is, of course, the first veto that we've seen and the first veto override that we've seen in something like 10 years, since the Bloomberg years. So, but it's not done. There will be probably a lawsuit, and we'll see if it gets implemented. It's an interesting, very interesting time, and a very key issue dealing with homelessness and affordable housing, two of the hottest and most interconnected issues in New York City politics.
Yeah, and I think those are, 2025, it'll be in play. We need to build more housing. I know there's been not enough being built. I will say one joke that I did not, this is a true thing that I thought, I did not share this on the pod, but when the mayor was about to veto the bills, Fabian ran into room 9. For some reason, I was the only one in it. I think someone was in the bathroom. And he said, the mayor's going to veto. And I said, veto who? Like VITO. I was like, oh,
there's a lot of vetoes in city politics.
Yeah.
The
I
Vito
pictured a guy named
Labella.
Vito. Yeah. Vito Turso for those old school spokespeople. Jeff, again, I wanted to end this maybe on something, I don't know if you want to add, I wanted to add something just fun and lighthearted. Very excited about your new job. We've already asked you what you're looking towards, especially this summer and further to the end of the year. What does Jeff Coltin like to do for fun? The people want to know. The man behind the tweets, he was doing a campaign confidential. What does Jeff Coltin, the person, like to do for fun?
Oh my goodness. I have a couple of bikes that are hanging up on the wall behind me right now. I really like to bike around. I ride bikes. I'm a stereotype of a young, formerly Brooklyn hipster. Outdated, that's like 10 years ago or whatever, but I do that. You know what I'm excited for? I have tickets to a Fall Out Boy concert next week. I'm so excited. Fall Out Boy was like my biggest band when I was like in junior high and high school, and really pumped to see that. So those are two basic things. I got a fiance. We love to bird watch together. But mostly my favorite thing to do is to text and call sources and get information about New York City politics. So sources, if you're listening to this, hit me up.
If your bosses are listening, Jeff, his favorite thing to do, he ignores his fiance, Caitlin, who runs social media for City and State. So all those jokes are hers. He's just like, please call me, talk to me. Never not working. It's true.
It's sadly true.
You're always on the phone. When I look at your computer screen, there's always all these messages up from people. You're always, yes, we sometimes glance at each other's computer screens. It's hard not to. No. I did want to mention, we didn't get to, I know Chrissy had top off, but I did so much enjoy the Run New York City, the celebration of New York City hip hop that you did for City and State.
Oh, yeah.
It was a great piece. I mean, anything you want to share from that, just in terms of, I know last week we did meet KRS-One and Eric B at City Hall. You were doing a little reporting there for your new gig, but I'm
just happy that I timed the story well. We knew that, of course, the 50th anniversary of hip hop was coming in August 2023. And so City and State and myself put out a cover story about how hip hop took over New York City politics. And that was a lot of fun to report. I listened to a lot of old school hip hop that I had never listened to before. And then a couple weeks after the story comes out, KRS-One and Eric B, two of the most formative, iconic MCs in the history of hip hop, show up at City Hall. You and I both got to meet them and chat with them a little bit, which was so cool. The politicians, we try and treat like human beings that we need to hold accountable. But when it comes to, just a couple of old school entertainers, I feel like it's different. And I can be like, wow, KRS-One, that's really cool.
Yeah, I knew the mayor got a lot of people were really mad because he said he's a hip hop mayor. I will say you don't really have much competition in the history of New York City in terms of hip hop mayors. I can't imagine anyone else, but
Yeah, look, obviously, the people were not exactly happy with KRS-One, who used to be a very progressive, conscious rapper, now seeming to embrace the mayor. But you're right. Objectively, he's got to be the most hip hop mayor we've ever had. So,
it wasn't Rudy or Ed Koch, it wasn't Lindsay, but yeah. Jeff Coltin, Politico, send him your scoops. Get it.
Sign up for New York Playbook. If you don't have New York Playbook already, sign up. We are revamping it. It's going to be great. And of course, first read Playbook in the morning, then put in your headphones, listen to FAQ NYC. That's your media diet. We're done.
Read the City Scoop, see who got married and who had a baby and who's switching jobs and it's all, the newsletters are there for you. But Jeff Coltin, thank you so much for joining us on behalf of me and Chrissy, and Harry's off. Adam is behind the tech. But thank you.
Thank you for having me on. Great to be back.
FAQ.
This has been FAQ NYC. We're part of The City, a nonprofit, nonpartisan newsroom dedicated to hard-hitting reporting that serves the people of New York. Our work is freely available to everyone at thecity.nyc and is supported by listeners and readers like you. Go to thecity.nyc/give if you'd like to pitch in. We are an affiliate of NYU's McSilver Institute for Poverty, Policy, and Research, and a proud member of the Brickhouse Cooperative of Independent Journalists, Critics, and Artists. Find it all at popula.com. Our hosts this episode were Chrissy Greer and me, Katie Honan. Harry Siegel, our executive producer, was off today. Our engineer is Adam Kamara. Thank you, listener, for joining us and making it this far. Stay cool this week, and we'll see you next time.